You know that song, What If the Stars Fell? This question has kept me up at night. What if the stars fell tomorrow? What would happen if the stars were to fall from the sky? And as I've pondered this question, I've come to realize that there are two ways in which the stars could fall. There's the physical way, like if they literally fell from the sky, and then there's the metaphorical way, like if the stars died. Now, in today's episode, we're going to talk about both ways because every single one of these scenarios is terrifying. So let's get into it. First, let us imagine that the Earth is a little girl lying down in her bed looking up at the sky full of wonder. She sees the moon and the stars, and she asks her mom, who's standing right beside her, "Mom, why do the stars twinkle?" The mom looks up at the sky with her childlike wonder still intact. She says the stars are actually really far away. It takes their light thousands of years to reach us. And when the light reaches us, it's twinkling because our atmosphere is scattering the light like a cosmic disco ball. Then Mom says something profound like, "One day you lines be old enough to understand just how big and amazing the universe is." Then the little girl grows up, becomes an astronomer, and gets access to powerful telescopes. She can now see that those stars she used to think were twinkling are actually moving through space. Those points of light aren't actually stars at all, but massive balls of burning plasma called blue giants. They're so far away, though, that all she can see is their light, not their movement. Now that she knows better, she's wondering what happened to all those stars that she saw as a kid. Did they all explode? Are they being eaten by black holes? Or have they just moved away from Earth? Well, that's a great question, but I'm afraid Mom was wrong. It turns out the stars aren't actually falling, they're flying. And you won't believe where they're going or how fast they're going there. If the stars fell, the Earth would not exist. Okay, take a deep breath. Let me explain. In our solar system, the Earth orbits around the Sun, keeping the perfect distance between them so that Earth isn't burnt to a crisp or frozen solid. But there's a delicate balance at play here. All the planets orbit the Sun in a flat disk, but if any one of those planets were to leave that disk, everything would go terribly wrong. Like if Jupiter were to come closer to the Earth, its gravity would start messing with the Earth's orbit, and it would either crash into the Sun or get flung out of the solar system. Now, the planets don't ever leave their orbital path because they perfectly balanced by the Sun's gravity. That balance is maintained because the planets are in constant free fall around the Sun. They're falling, but they're also moving sideways, and that means they're in a perpetual state of weightlessness. That's why astronauts can float around in space. So if the stars were to fall, it would mean that all those stars are no longer in a stable orbit around the Milky Way's center. And if they were to get too far away from the center of the galaxy, the gravity holding them in place would vanish. If they were to fly too close to the center, they would be ripped apart by tidal forces. So, wherever they go together, and when they go, Earth goes with them. But wait, you might be thinking, what if they don't actually fall? What if they just die? Well, that's a fair question. One of the biggest threats to life on Earth is a gamma-ray burst, or GRB for short. GRBs are the most violent explosions in the universe except for the Big Bang itself. They can release more energy than 40 billion atomic bombs, and they kill everything within 100 billion miles. When a massive star dies, it can collapse in on itself and form a black hole. As it collapses, all of its mass is concentrated in one spot, and it releases a giant burst of gamma rays. Scientists don't know exactly what causes the GRB, but they think that something happens at the edge of the black hole that sends out these gamma rays. And if one of those bursts were to hit Earth, well, there would be nothing left to tell the story. The good news is that GRBs are rare. In the roughly 100 billion years that stars have been around, only 4 GRBs have occurred in our galaxy. And none of them happened anywhere near us, so Earth and all of humanity has been safe. But even though we've been safe so far, it doesn't mean that we will be forever. Okay, now let's imagine that the stars didn't die, but instead they fell. How would that affect life on Earth? For this scenario, let us ignore all the damage that would be done by the entry of a few trillion tons of rock hurtling through the atmosphere at 72,000 miles per hour. Instead, let us assume that a few trillion meteorites rained down onto the surface of the Earth without causing any damage. What would happen then? Would the world end? Well, in this case, the answer is no. In fact, the world would become slightly warmer. It turns out that meteorites aren't actually dangerous to life on Earth. They're usually small and burn up in the atmosphere before reaching the ground. And even if they do make it to the ground, they're usually just rocks that don't contain anything dangerous. In fact, scientists think that all life on Earth started with organic molecules that came from space. And those organic molecules probably arrived on meteorites. So while shooting stars might not be dangerous, they may have actually helped kickstart life on Earth. Now, it turns out that shooting stars are actually pieces of debris from other objects in space. As the Earth flies through space, it flies through fields of debris, and that debris is mostly dust. Sometimes, though, it runs into larger pieces of debris, like chunks of rock or chunks of ice. When that happens, those chunks break off and burn up in the atmosphere. And sometimes, just sometimes, they make it all the way to the ground. In 2013, a piece of debris from a Russian satellite burned up in the atmosphere over Chelyabinsk, Russia. It caused a shock wave that blew out windows in buildings and injured more than 1,000 people. But it wasn't dangerous. It was just a piece of space junk. So what does this mean for the future of humanity? Well, the short answer is we're screwed. The long answer is that we're screwed in a lot of different ways. First off, we're living in a cosmic minefield. There is so much debris floating around in space that if the Earth were to suddenly stop orbiting the Sun, we would be obliterated. Also, we're screwed because it turns out that all the stars in the sky aren't actually stars. You see, stars are just massive balls of gas. And some of those balls are big enough to mess with the Earth's orbit. And others are made entirely of ice that could easily break apart and cause chaos. And finally, we're screwed because the Earth's orbit will change anyway. The Sun isn't in exactly the same place every year. Its orbit is slightly elliptical, meaning the Earth isn't always the same distance from the Sun. And because of that, the Earth's orbit will change over time. Eventually, the orbit will shift far enough away from the Sun that the Earth will freeze over. But that's okay because we'll all be dead anyway. In about 1 billion years, the Sun will become a red giant and swallow the Earth. So yeah, we're screwed, but at least we went out with a bang. All jokes aside, though, there is a chance that one day the Earth will be struck by a meteorite that could potentially wipe out life on Earth, and that SY scientists are working hard to detect any asteroids that might be hurtling towards our planet. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory is currently working on the Asteroid Threat Assessment Project to map out all near-Earth asteroids. And you can help with this project. The more eyes looking for asteroids, the better. So if you want to help NASA find those pesky space rocks, you can sign up to be a citizen scientist and join the hunt. Thanks for watching this episode of SCI Show Space. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can join our community on a crowdfunding platform. Our community gets access to a whole bunch of perks, including blooper reels, behind-the-scenes posts, and most importantly, the power to request topics for us to cover in future episodes. So if you've ever wanted to see a SCI Show Space episode on literal shooting stars, now is your chance.